Hello and welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of Webflow and Code. Today's episode is going to be about debugging CSS in the browser and how we can bring those changes back into our Webflow project. Now, a lot of you might not know what CSS is, so I'm going to do a quick rundown, break it up as easily as I can. We won't go into everything, and we'll probably learn more things as we traverse through the course. But right now I just want to kind of go through what CSS is and kind of how it works. So I'm inside of my Webflow project right now, and I've come along to the custom code section of the website. Now, first of all, we want to be able to write CSS in our code. So I'll do that in our website. So I'll do that real quick now. And the way we do that is we create two style tags, and this enables us now to write CSS. So CSS is a language that we use to style our websites, right? And it's separate from the HTML. The HTML is about the content, the style is about the design and the styling, the CSS, and it stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And the way we write CSS, there's a few different important concepts to write. The first concept to understand is the selector, right? If I go here and just type this out, please ignore what I'm typing out right now. I'm just getting something set up so we can start talking about it. So the first area is the selector. And this is what you're going to be applying your style to. And you can apply your styles to tags. So if it's a heading, then you apply it to a heading tag, and I'll go quickly into how you find out which tag it is. You can apply them to styles, you can apply them to IDs, and you can apply them to attributes on your elements, on your HTML elements. Basically, there are a number of different things we can apply the styles to, and this is where you would write it in here. And then the next area is the style block, and inside of here, inside of the two curly brackets, is where you would put the properties that you want to affect on the CSS. So what does that look like in practice? Well, I'll just cover three selectors here. So the first selector is a class selector, and that's denoted by a dot. Let me move my mouse there. This is denoted by a dot, right? If I want to select a class, and depending on whatever the name of the class is. So let's name this class my hyphen class, okay? So we want to apply this styling to whatever element has the class my class on it, and we want to make that background color red. And the properties here again are probably something that you're familiar with when it comes to Webflow as in the styles inspector. So it might take a bit of, we'll learn and we'll grow and we'll become familiar with some of the properties that you're able to use. But essentially, if you just Google, background color as an example, background color CSS, you'll probably find what you want to do. Text color CSS, shadow CSS or something like that. You'll then learn what these properties are. So getting back to the example here, I'm going to apply a background color of red to my class. And how tags work in the selector area is we don't have a dot or anything, we just put the P. And for every P, we want to apply the red background to. Okay, and as you can imagine, I won't go through it. As you can imagine, we save it, and for every single P, it will apply the red background to. Now, it's important to remember that this will apply to every single P on your web page, right? So, you want to be very certain about the styles that you want to apply when you're applying them globally. That's why classes are quite handy, is because they will only apply those styling to the class that you apply that, for instance, the my class to. It will only apply this background color red in this instance to those elements. So you can be a bit more granular with how you style things. There will be instances where you want to just apply it to them all, especially if you want consistently across your website. you want to, you know, it's a terrible example, but you wanted all your headings. I know you can do this in the editor, but if you wanted all your H1s to have a margin of sorts, then you want to apply that for consistency. You want to apply that to them all. Of course, we can do it in the designer itself, but just for this example, that might be a case where you do that. The other common way of applying style to a specific element is the ID, and we select an ID with the hash, and it will be, you know, this can be anything, my-ID. You know, that could really be anything, as long as the element that you want to affect has the ID of my ID in this instance. So let's go back to the designer, add a my ID. We remove that class. We can add an ID here, my ID. There we go. Just a quick aside. Now, before we had my class and we wrote my hyphen class exactly as it appears. Now, there might, you know, my hyphen class is not too clean looking, so you can actually just write it in plain old English, right? And when we publish, Webflow will actually hyphenate that that class. But you can see that the my hyphen class, now Webflow has gone ahead and actually hyphenated that class. So it looks nice and tidy in the navigator here, but it also applies the hyphenated class behind the scenes, and that's because we can't have spaces in our classes at all. Two final points then that I want to quickly cover. So if we had nested elements that we wanted to apply styling to, my advice is that we keep our selectors as simple as possible, because you can get such a headache from understanding what selectors are applying what. It can become a bit of a minefield. So I would keep them as simple as possible where you can. But if you need to be more specific, and the reason why we'd be more specific, if you want a class, if you want a style to override an existing style, then you can then be more targeted. There's a couple of ways you can be more targeted. We know, as for this example, right, we know that there's also a my class on that element, so we can combine selectors here like so, and we can also I mean, we know that's a H1 as well, and now it's important that tags are the first element in this selector, so we're being super specific here. H1 with an ID of my ID, with a class of my class. Now, that's going to be obviously very, very rare within our Webflow project. So this is going to be very, very specific. So if you need to be more specific, you can combine any number of elements, any number of selectors in this way. Hello, people. Future Sam here. Just wanted to clarify something that I don't think was quite as clear as it could have been here. So we had a H1 with an ID of my ID and a class of my class as our selector here. So an element that you want to apply the background red needs to have all those things. So it needs to have an ID of my ID, and it needs to have a class of my class, and it needs to H1. So you can get very, very specific with your selectors. I hope that clears things up and is a bit clearer. Yeah, on with the show. You can also be more specific by nesting. So if I had a div with an ID of my ID, and then within that I wanted to target all paragraphs specifically within that ID, that my ID div, then we can nest like this just with a space. We're saying all P's inside of any element, any and all elements with an ID of my ID. So it's actually just an aside here. It's IDs. You're only supposed to have one instance of one ID on any page. So I can only have one element with my ID, an ID of my ID on that page. Now, Webflow does allow you to do that, to add my ID to multiple elements. Absolutely allows you to do that. But the web does not like that for a number of reasons, or maybe I'll make a video about that, why we should only have one ID. But So it's kind of like it's kind of an interesting example to use IDs. It would be very rare for you to style IDs just because there can only be one version of or one instance of that ID on the page. So we don't tend to use IDs too much. Classes are just much more versatile, much more reusable. And it doesn't mess with the semantics of the page or anything like that. So I just want to do one last thing before we finish off this episode. Sorry, there's a lot of information here. I just wanted to get everything just to sort of set a precursor to the series in this one episode. But given that, as we've just found out, that if we write styles and things like that in the custom code and it doesn't show up in the editor, there might be some cases and instances where I jump into a code pen. Now, if you don't know what code pen is, it's an editor that allows you to quickly sort of prototype styles and anything to do with kind of the web, and it's a codepen.io. And what we can do here is, now I'm going to use a shortcut right now, but if we used, again, our old faithful my class, right? If I type my class and hit tab, it will create a div, and I'll just put my name in there. And you'll see that it actually renders on our page there without really us doing anything. So, and now I can quickly just create some prototype that you can imagine this being a lot quicker than publishing it to my Webflow project. You know, so this will be another instance where I might play around with code. So this might be another useful tool for you to start prototyping and playing around with CSS and all the rest of it. So yeah. So there we go. We'll learn lots more with regards to CSS as we go through the series, but I just wanted to give you a really brief rundown of how CSS is marked up and what we can expect to be writing and using in the coming episodes. So I hope that this is a great starting place just to kind of propel us into the new series. Once again, if you enjoyed this, just let me know that you enjoyed it with a like and subscribe if you kind of want to follow along with the journey. And if you enable notifications, that also will notify you when a new episode comes out. So yeah, thanks for sticking around, and until next time, happy no coding.